All right, grade seven. So this week we're looking at expanding European frontiers. This is the history section of SS that we're going to be looking at today. It's on page number 113 of your textbook. And we're going to be looking at the movement of the Trekboers with their slaves and servants inland. All right, so by now you know that we've had the first Dutch settlers at the Cape, and they came from Holland, traveling to the Spice Islands. You should know now that they used the Cape as a rest stop, firstly starting by building small little houses with gardens just to replenish fresh fruits and vegetables on the ships, and then later it started to become more of a farmland, and also with the addition of the French Huguenots, where they had winelands inside Cape Town. And then we also spoke about the Freeburgers that wanted to become independent. So now with the Trekboers, they were still part of the VOC, but they started to move further inland. They were looking for better grazing areas. So if we look at the information on 113, it says the first farms at the Cape were mainly wine and wheat farms. Now, there were wine farms, one, because of the climate that we have in the Cape, and because the French Huguenots had already been a lot more experienced in wine farming coming from France. That's the reason why we had majority wine farms in the Cape. However, the population was increasing, and you know now with geography, with the increase in population, there's a bigger demand for food, and there's opportunities to also make more money. So if we continue, it says here, but from the 1700s, more settlers started moving further inland to farm with cattle. It says there was a bigger demand for fresh meat in the Cape, so that they could make more money this way. It says they also wanted to be more independent and not controlled by the VOC officials. So they were pulling away from the VOC officials to try and become their own farmers, right, and make their own money. It says these farmers were called Trekboers, so that directly translates into traveling farmers, because they moved so often. It says the VOC gave them large areas of land where they could graze their herds. They did not plant crops, but moved on when they wanted more land or better grazing. They had large families, and each son wanted to have their own farm, and with this they moved on. As they did so, the colony became larger, and by the 1750s they had reached the Gerib Orange and the river in the north. By the 1770s they had reached Fish River in the east. All right, so just to summarize that in for you and looking at this picture, we know that the Dutch settled here in Cape Town, and from there this would have been mostly winelands controlled or run by the French Huguenots. But as they wanted more independence and there was more demand for food, they had started traveling inland. And because these families, each son wanted their own piece of land or own farm, they had to travel further inland to find places to farm and places to graze. They did not plant crops because obviously they were moving along the whole time. So if you ever ask the question as to why did the Trekboers not plant crops and just dealt with cattle, is because they obviously could move the cattle along with them, finding new grazing areas, and then they were able to use the cattle to trade. Right, and this is also now where biltong and etc. was discovered by these guys, because this was the main source of food would have been meat, as they would preserve their meat by drying it out. All right, with the lifestyles and stories of the Trekboers, it says most Trekboers were poor and lived simple lives, making most of the things that they needed. It says they bought gunpowder, guns, teas, coffee, sugar, and cotton, as well as cloth from traveling traders who visited an area once or twice a year. They bought them in exchange for cattle, sheep, and animal skins. They also hunted animals for meat and skins. So it was still very much a bartering system. There was no currency or form of currency currently in Southern Africa at this time. Okay, everything was still by trade. On page number 114, you'll see that there's two sources there for you to look at, one being a picture and one being a story. In history, it's an important skill to have to be able to read a source or look at a picture and be able to interpret information from that. So that's what we're practicing now, and that's what activity 5 on page number 115 is going to be doing for you, is helping you practice those skills and hone those skills for when you have them in tests and exams. That is the only activity for this week, and just to tie in everything for you again in this brief summary video, you just need to know that from the 1700s, a lot of the farmers wanted to become independent, no longer underneath the rule of the VOC, so they decided to move further inland. Okay, as they moved further inland, obviously their families grew, each son wanted their own piece of land to farm, and therefore they kept on moving further inland to find better areas to farm. And also they needed grazing land for their cattle, because remember, they only farmed with cattle. They did not plant any crops or vegetables, etc. They only used to deal with cattle. And they use the cattle as a form, as a source of money to trade for certain things, from traveling traders, etc. Okay, it was a very hard life, not an easy life. As we said, the lifestyles were very poor, but it did now lead to becoming more permanent farmers when they reached a place of land inland where they started to farm. Right, great. So you're going to be doing activity 5 on page number 115 for me. Again, we'll try and summarize everything in near the end of the unit, but I think you guys are on track and you know exactly what's required from you.